The main difference between singing and just playing a piece of music is that you've got that added element of familiarity, and that's so important to an infant because their perceptual universe is incredibly confusing, right? Our ability to infer emotion and the cues that we use to do that actually changes quite a lot over the course of development, and pitch perception does become more specialised over the course of development. Just last month, actually, there was a research publication that hit the headlines about beat perception in newborn babies. You know, how some people play music with the idea of it, you know, being heard by the infant in that kind of last trimester. And they've shown that
Hi Annie.
Hello Mark, how are you doing?
Yeah, very good. How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you.
Welcome to High Point.
Thank you, nice to be here.
Yeah, I don't know how long, when I started to speak to you about High Point, the podcast, but the first time I heard what you were doing, and we're friends in real life, the first time I heard what you were doing, I thought, I need to have you on the podcast because it's really interesting.
Thank you.
So, it's going to be more I'll let you introduce yourself. But hopefully it will be very interesting.
Hopefully, yeah.
Can you introduce yourself the way you would like to be introduced?
My name is Annie Pye and I'm a lecturer at the University of Manchester. I am the Deputy Programme Director of the undergraduate psychology degree, and part of my teaching involves leading a unit in the psychology of music, which is probably my most favourite part of my job because it's the thing I love. I just love music, and it's something that I kind of got together last year with a bunch of colleagues from the Manchester Centre for Audiology and Deafness, and they all come from it at quite a different angle. So we start by talking about kind of auditory perception and physiology of the ear and how we perceive certain aspects of music. And as the course moves on, we kind of get to the more applied stuff. So music in clinical populations and how it can be used as a therapeutic intervention. So it really spans like psychology of music in all sorts of different walks of life. So it's really lovely unit, and great bunch of colleagues that I work on it with. So
great.
Yeah, brilliant part of my job.
Do you play any instruments?
Badly. I started playing classical guitar when I was about 8 years old, and I did a few grades on that. But no, I haven't. I've never really mastered musical instruments, but I've always been fascinated with how music has the propensity to kind of evoke emotions in people, and I've always used music as an emotional outlet, and alongside my PhD, which is a grueling process for anyone who's ever done one, it was always kind of a source of sanctuary to me, was making music. So I've engaged in that process a lot, but I wouldn't necessarily describe myself as a competent musician in a lot of ways. So, how about you?
You at least practice music, and you love music because of practice.
Yeah. I mean, I think that I've got competency in kind of my ability to hear music and have a good ear for music in a way, like the spectral side of it. So pitch and things, I can quite easily hear a piece of music and play it back a lot of the time. But rhythm, I'm a disaster with. And I know you said that you play the drums. I just have no sense of inherent rhythm.
I think it's quite interesting. I'll ask you. I've got a lot of questions for you, but the sense of rhythm and tune, I think it's educated, it's environmental, much more than innate and natural. Because when I play keyboard, I still don't own the fact that I've played for years and years and years organ, but then after that I played also percussions.
Where do you get an organ? Where do you practice an organ?
Well, there's in music schools there's always an organ, and then after that you need to go to obviously churches to practice, and some organs are very very specific. The way you play some organs is very specific, so you need to go to a very specific church.
That's so cool.
Yeah,
I never knew that about you.
And then after that you can buy an organ, like an electronic one.
Yeah.
Which is a bit more fun because you can do a lot of electronic like tricks and stuff with it, and then you can practice with obviously the hands and the feet with it. Cool. So it's not bigger than it's even smaller than a piano.
Wow. Okay.
So yeah.
Amazing. Learn something new every day.
Yeah, exactly. So what I meant is I was really rubbish at rhythm.
Okay.
And at the music school, you could definitely see the difference between the percussionists and the others. So every exercise on rhythm, they were just flying.
Yeah.
And as soon as I started percussion, I was also feeling like I was flying.
Yeah.
And reading rhythm was really easy for me. So yeah. So that's what I think.
Did you go to a specialist music school?
I went to a general school, and then on the side, I was going to a specialist school. So yeah, for years and years.
Wow.
But yeah, that's why I became an acoustician, I guess.
Yeah. Cultivated a love for you.
Yeah. So yeah, I obviously you told me about your course, and we had a chat, and I thought it would be really interesting if you could do that course, or if we could speak about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Obviously, we're going to try to make it simple, or if you can
I'll
try to make it simple and understandable.
Undergraduate level, so it's good stuff. But yeah, I give 2 lectures on the course. So one's in musical development, and one's in music and emotion, and they follow on from the kind of like how do we hear the basic features of music? What are the basic features of music? So before they come to my lectures, our students will hear about what we mean by things like harmony and melody. So if I say anything that feels like it might need an explanation, then please do roll me back a bit, and we'll go from there.
The other thing we didn't mention is that you also have a podcast.
I do. It is. Yeah, it's for
is it
students.
Online?
No, it's for students on the psychology undergraduate program. So me and the program director host a podcast called Encyclopedia. I don't know if that's a really cringeworthy name for a podcast, but
no, it's not.
Psych, like psychology, pod, like podcast. So yeah, we host a podcast that we release every month for our undergraduate students. Still very much in its infancy, so I'm hoping to learn some tricks from you here today. You look like a pro. I don't know.
Yeah, thank you, but I really don't feel like
I get there. You get there.
You have to improve every one thing for every episode.
Yeah.
But yeah. It was a really big, really steep learning curve.
Yeah.
I'm still learning, trying to not make mistakes now.
Yeah, I feel like I'm at the very start of that. I've just recruited 2 undergraduate interns to help me, one of which has got expertise in marketing and the other one which has got expertise in auditory editing.
Great.
So I feel like I'm now better equipped than I was a month ago. So we'll see how that goes.
Cool.
Let you know in a year.
Worth it, I can tell you. So yeah, obviously the first part of your course, you gave me your course for some homework to prepare that episode, but it's about prenatal and newborn music development. So can we start with a very simple question? When did we start knowing that we can hear and perceive music?
Yeah, so I guess it was in the 1900s, before there was kind of all the technology that we have today to kind of look at what perception might be to a fetus. There was this kind of widely held belief, or assumption, that auditory facilities didn't really start until the point of birth, so that there wasn't much auditory capabilities of the fetus. And the very earliest studies that started to look at that was using very rudimentary apparatus, so like these styluses with pencils and things that they would rest on the bellies of pregnant women, and then just tap blocks of wood alongside these recording devices and see if there was any changes in the contours of the abdomen in response to those noises that they were making. And they did observe that there were movements in the fetus in response to sound. So then at that point, it was about 1935, they were starting to rethink this assumption that the fetus was unable to perceive sound. But through the development of things like ultrasound and other technologies, we're now at a point where we can work out to a much better degree what auditory life is like for the fetus. And it's really in that kind of final trimester of pregnancy. So, weeks 26 to full term, where we see this development of auditory capabilities. So in the first 2 trimesters, we see very much the development of the physiology of the ear and the cochlea becoming a cochlea. But then in the last trimester, we see that becoming fine-tuned to be able to perceive different frequencies. And that perception of frequency is really important for voices, language, and music as well. So from weeks 26 onwards, you can see that capability in a fetus, which is pretty cool.
Great. It seems to have had a big boom in that type of research for auditory development of the babies and the fetuses. I remember our the midwife who gave birth to our first child.
Yeah.
She kept talking about it, and she was doing a master's at the time.
Amazing.
And it was on the music development or the development of the auditory system, or I can't remember exactly the exact topic, but it was on, babies and music.
Yeah, and just last month, actually, there was a research publication that hit the headlines about perception of beat perception in newborn babies, and how they seem to be able to, rather than just like statistically learn patterns, they actually seem to have this innate beat perception, which is pretty cool as well. So there's definitely an interest in it, and it's a cool area of research. And studies have shown that actually, how some people play music with the idea of it, being heard by the infant in that kind of last trimester. They've looked at physiological responses to music after the point of birth to stimuli that they've kind of been playing to infants whilst they're in utero, to see if there's any kind of impact of remembering that music on, like heart rate, breathing rate and things like that. And they've shown that you can, play the same little piece of music twice a day in weeks 35, 36 and 37 of gestation. And that will actually, if you then play that piece of music this infant has been trained on in utero, when they're out of the womb, born, that will have a more profound physiological response in terms of heart rate and breathing rates. You'll see a nice reduction in response to that music that they're familiar with than would a piece of music that they're not familiar with. So there is definitely some kind of efficacy in the idea that you would perhaps share music with a fetus, which sounds like a really weird thing to do, but But there's definitely research that suggests that it's actually got benefits.
That's cool. So why is it important to sing to babies and children?
So I guess singing is really universal. So it's emerged spontaneously in cultures all across the world. And it's the most kind of universal form of music, I would say. So that suggests that it's got some kind of evolutionary value, right? And I guess the two main theories here are that it's used as a form of emotional regulation for your infant. So it's typically, we use this way of singing, and I don't know if you've heard of infant-directed speech, which is that kind of really exaggerated speaking voice that you use. I saw some
programs about this.
So when we're talking to our kids, we kind of instinctively talk in this quite exaggerated way. We almost sing the words a little more. We speak more slowly. We do the same with song, right? So we instinctively sing in a certain way to our infants. And there's typically like two categories of songs that we share with our infants. We've got basically songs to soothe, like lullabies, and in our culture that would be something like Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. I don't know what it would be in France.
Vous dirai-je, maman.
Yep. Perfect. And then you've also got the play songs as well, which are kind of there to stimulate your infant a little more. So Wheels on the Bus might be an example of that, or Heads, Shoulders, Knees and Toes. So not the kind of relaxation songs. It's more the stimulation side of it. So we've got these songs that serve those two different purposes. And as I said previously, we've seen that music does have this physiological impact on infants. So it does, soothe them when they're distressed and things. So I guess the main functions of songs are to stimulate and to soothe, and
makes you happier as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just a really intuitive thing to do, isn't it? But then there's also this idea that because we use certain patterns of phrasing and this exaggerated and slower voice when we sing, that it helps to scaffold the learning of language in those early years as well.
I was going to say that. I was going to mention another question.
Yeah.
Obviously, the first one, my daughter, is they're both bilingual, but we got told that she would start speaking later than other kids, but she didn't seem to have any delays in her speech development, although she very, very much speaks English now. She doesn't hardly speak French. She's trying to make a lot of effort now. But it was quite interesting, and I don't know if it's fully linked to always singing and playing music to her. There was also probably reading, and also apparently I've heard there was a podcast in French, so I can't share it with you, but it was the guest was asked some questions about how influenced we are with the sex of our kids, and the games we play are very different. Whether there's a boy, we've got a boy or a girl, and then sometimes we can't help it because it's just cultural. And the games that are played with girls generally are more prone to encourage language development. So maybe reading, and I mean, it's something stupid, but we do play with dollies as well with boys, but we didn't used to, or we might play with dolls far less with boys than with girls, and all those games encourage you to develop the language. Yeah.
So interesting. I mean, as a parent, and I lectured for maternity cover a little while back, language development in very early children, and I don't know that much about it. I wouldn't profess to be an expert on any of that, but it's interesting that you see and in relation to play and gender differences, like, I don't know about you, but I feel like there is such an innateness to it as well, though. Like, if I look, I mean, I've got a girl and a boy, and I love the idea that we definitely do bring a lot to the table. But Oshan, my boy, from such an early age, before he could, like, you know, walk even, he was just obsessed with balls.
Yeah, same as ours.
Absolutely, he would just chase them all around everywhere. And then when he started walking, all he wanted to do was kick a football around. Like, and then my daughter.
But maybe, I mean, my boy is the same. He's obsessed about balls, and you know his first words was ball.
Yeah.
But is it the fact that we've seen him play with a ball
that you've then endorsed
and then
it?
we say, oh yeah, good.
Yeah.
Just
but
unconsciously,
like,
and then maybe with our daughters, we may not have said anything, not encouraged them. I don't know. There's
definitely an element of that, but I just don't think it can be fully explained by that, because, like, also my youngest one is a daughter, so I've got the opposite. You've got the older daughter and the younger son, but I feel like for her early development, she was surrounded by Oshan's toys, right? So she was very much in this perhaps boy-gendered toy environment, if that was something that we were subconsciously imposing on our kids. But still, it's dolls. When she's at nursery, all she wants to play with is the doll. Maybe that's because it's the novel stimulus and we haven't got many dolls in our house, but
no,
like,
I agree. There's just, before I thought, no, they'll have very neutral educations, and they'll be very.
There's something in there. There's definitely a mix of,
but no, I'm just
nature and
revising,
nurture.
Revising theory.
Like most things in life.
Is there any differences between singing to a child and playing music to a child? As in, if we sing a lullaby, maybe we'll be able to repeat it more and emphasize some words. Whereas if we play something on our speaker, they'll be far less prone to repeat it or singing it.
I guess my PhD's in voice perception, actually, so that's quite a pertinent question. And we do, from before the point of birth, develop a familiarity with the voices that are in our auditory environment a lot. So I guess the main difference between singing and just playing a piece of music is that you've got that added element of familiarity, and that's so important to an infant because their perceptual universe is incredibly confusing, right? So it's an onslaught. They're born into a world that they can't make visual percepts. They can't necessarily coherently hear what pitch is in the first instance. So that familiarity is going to be incredibly reassuring to an infant, isn't it? So if they've got that, you know, they know that it's their mother or their father or their brother talking or singing, then I imagine that would be the main source of reassurance, in that it's you know, a stable feature of their environment, whereas a recording probably doesn't provide that same degree of coherence.
There's I don't know if you've got the book of Baby Jack Jack from The Incredibles.
No, I haven't. But maybe
I've got
I need to get it.
I kept reading it, to my daughter, and there's one about the babysitter who plays music, Mozart, and says playing Mozart, so classical music stimulates their intellectual abilities. But I thought, is it really? Does it really?
I don't know is the answer. Yeah, I've not looked into that specific question. There is mixed research in relation to like the Mozart effect in later development, but I'm not sure about in early years. But
it's probably practicing it that increases and improves your intellectual abilities and physical as well, psychological.
Stimulating an interest in music from an early age is really a lovely thing to do, that promotes kind of, and like if you think about different structures that we use for music across the world, we become very accustomed to the culture of our music very, very early on. So in Western music, we typically use something called isochronous metric structures, which is where the intervals between beats are held constant. But in Balkan music, they use non-isochronous metric structures, which can sound really alien to somebody who's not been exposed to them from quite early in development, and has that cultural understanding of those metric structures. So when I try and listen to that music, I find it really hard to make sense of it, whereas it would come quite naturally to somebody who's grown up within that culture and had very early exposure to it. So I guess from that research, I would take away the idea that any amount of musical exposure from a very young age will increase the realms of possibility within your world of auditory perception. So I think, there probably is something in intellectual stimulation as a result of listening to music in those early years. But
not just solely and purely and only listening to music.
Classical music is the be all and end all of that. But I just think as much as experience as you can provide is only going to be a wonderful thing later down the line,
So let's go to speak about the pitch perception.
Yep.
What is it?
Well, that's quite
hard to describe it.
So every
and the
sound wave
of it as well.
that hits our ear, right, is made up of a fundamental frequency, which is a frequency at a certain repetition rate, and then harmonic integers like harmonic frequencies at integers of that multiple integers of that fundamental. And that's like pitch is something that we create. It's a perceptual phenomenon where we integrate frequencies to find like the tune or the note of a speaking voice or a musical note. So it's a perceptual ability that researchers have asked, are we born with the ability to create a pitch percept, or do we develop that? Are we born with just a lot of frequencies hitting our ear, a lot of noise that we then have to create into the signal? And at what point in development are we able to create that pitch from those frequencies that hit our ear? And there's some really lovely studies out there on this, but fundamentally it suggests that at around 4 months of age, which is quite an interesting age anyway. I don't know if you remember the 4-month kind of regression. I call it a regression, but it becomes this stage of development. Yes. But they go mental, don't they? The whole world changes at that point. And that's the point at which researchers have suggested they start to be able to kind of coherently perceive pitch. So taking all of that like noise that's all these different frequencies and then making it into a coherent pitch happens at around 4 months, and you can just see how much your world might change as a function of that, right? And then when you think about this little baby who's just been overwhelmed, and visually as well, right? When you get these baby books given to you, when you go to like the book starter clinic, and it's just like black and white lines and contours and patterns, because their visual worlds when they're born, these newborns, they don't make much sense, and it's all about that kind of contrast and contour rather than form perception. It's similar in the auditory world, right? Like you've got all of this noise coming in, and you've got to kind of use statistical learning to be able to make sense of that environment. And at around 4 months, we see this kind of big development in the auditory systems of infants so that they can kind of make a little bit of sense of pitch in their environment. And it continues to develop over that first year, to the point where 7-8 months it's looking a bit more stable than it was at 4 months, but it begins to emerge at around 4 months of age.
The 4 months were probably the second trauma of after having kids. Because
it's a hell.
the first trauma is the birth.
Yep. Yeah.
And then the second trauma is when you think it's all good, you think your baby sleeps very well. And
4
suddenly
months.
you just don't understand they don't sleep anymore.
I know, it's mad, isn't it? But then if you think about their world, right? Like all of that stuff that's going on, they're suddenly making sense of their eyes and their ears. And like, it makes total sense that they would not sleep anymore because everything's amazing then, right?
Yeah.
They can see your face coherently. They can hear your voice as something totally new and exciting that wasn't there before. And that's mad. But it is infuriating.
Like because you don't understand it. You don't know why it's happening.
I know,
why
right?
they've stopped sleeping well. And I'll always remember we were at that time of 4 months. We went back to France to visit our family and introduce and it was during a heat wave. And we thought we'd completely messed up her sleep pattern and way all the habits and the routine. We thought we'd messed up that because of going to France during the heat wave. And they probably after a year or maybe less, we realized, it's just sleep.
Yeah, the 4
regression.
Regression. It's a terrible word for it, isn't it? Because actually, if you think about the progress that they're making at that point in time, it's not right at all. But yeah, it was hell for us as well. We didn't go to France when my child was 4 months. We actually went and walked the Pembrokeshire coastal path when Oshan was 4 months old, and we spent the summer in tents. It was lovely, but it was exhausting. We were up at 4 every morning, but we were walking a lot, so we kind of stumbled around the Pembrokeshire coastal path for a summer, horribly sleep deprived and trying to make sense of this hell that we'd landed in with a 4-month-old baby. But it's a lot.
And you feel like you're turning crazy, trying to find any solution to get your baby to sleep. Yeah,
I've done some crazy things in an attempt to get them down before.
Not harmful though.
No, just slings, dancing around like a moron with white noise on.
Or taking your car and go for a trip to get your baby to sleep.
It all goes out the window, this kind of green-minded eco lifestyle when you've got a screaming 4-month-old baby who doesn't sleep at night. Agreed.
So how do we test the pitch perception, that we know the baby can perceive the right pitch? Or is it more like, is it less precise than we think? And it's just that they can recognize, for example, some certain songs or certain sounds more than others because they've been educated to that, trained.
So the study that I use as an example, it's really clever study that is probably too in depth for this, but they use EEG, so measurements of you put electrodes on the scalp of the infants and look at brain waves in response to different auditory stimuli. And they use something called an oddball paradigm, which is where you have standard stimuli and deviant stimuli. And they've set it up in such a way that our brains are quite amazing. And if we remove the fundamental frequency from an auditory stimulus, but we keep some of the harmonic frequencies in, our brains have this ability to infer the pitch of that note from the evidence available to us. So even in the absence of the physical frequency that corresponds to the pitch, we make this very intuitive inference about the pitch of a noise.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So
I think I can understand it. Yeah.
They set up this study very cleverly, where they had some stimuli that were deviant and they had these missing lower frequencies. Whereas if you could perceive the pitch, you would be able to infer that the pitch of the note was the same or different. I can't remember. Hang on. This is probably too much detail. But if you didn't have that ability to perceive the pitch, it would appear the same. So they were looking for this, what's called a mismatch negativity, which is like a nice peak in the brain waves in response to these deviant trials. So if they could perceive that pitch, they would see that they'd see this nice peak, and if they couldn't, they wouldn't see it. And they found that in 3-month-old infants, that wasn't there, but in 4-month-old infants, it was. It's a really nice graph. I don't know if you ever put graphs on your podcast.
I do. If you send it to me,
I will do.
I can share it.
But
in the video version.
Yeah, in the video version, I'll show you it. You can see here. So 3-month-old infants, no lovely mismatch negativity, but in these 4-month-old infants, and then it's even more pronounced in these 7-month-old infants. So you can see that over those first few months of development, we get this really nice development of that ability to perceive pitch. And generally what we see in terms of like early development is that these universal aspects of auditory environments like pitch perception and relative pitch perception happen really early on. So those are the kind of universal innate things, and then later in development is more kind of the culturally specific stuff, so key membership, harmonies and that kind of thing. So it's a general pattern. But
interesting. Why can't some people sing in tune? Do you know?
Great question. So there is something called congenital amusia, which actually exists in about 4% of the population apparently, which I had no idea about. And that's basically this inability to coherently perceive very familiar songs or produce them as well. So it's like a complete absence of recognition of music and tune and pitch. So there's huge individual differences in our ability to perceive pitch. And a lot of research has looked into kind of the broad spectrum we see, but there are this really interesting class of people who just don't seem to have that ability altogether. You can also acquire amusia through brain damage to certain parts of the brain. But it's really interesting that up to 4% of the population just don't have this innate pitch ability that a lot of us do have.
And do you think we can train it as well? We can.
Doesn't seem to be the case for that
people
population.
Don't sing in tune can end up singing in tune if they practice music or they get some training, intense music training, or not something intense.
I'd imagine so. It's not something I know a great deal about, but I guess there are these pitch matching tasks that you can do online. Actually, I did one when I was setting up this module, and I'm actually really bad at it. Where basically what it does is it plays you a note, and you have to try and sing it back, and see how close you are in frequency to that note. And with that visual feedback and that training, I'm sure you can probably improve your pitch accuracy. But again, it goes back to that debate, doesn't it? Like nature, nurture, like how much can you improve it when there is this spectrum of auditory ability in relation to pitch anyway, or research suggests there is, that...
What do you think about perfect pitch then? Can you... Well,
that's an interesting one as well.
There's apparently there's some research, and you can confirm, that showed that Asian kids or Asian people were more likely to have the perfect pitch. So sing specific notes without a reference, so without being played that notes before. And it's because of their language is much more tone, or there's more subtleties in their languages in terms of tones that encourages the development of the pitch, perfect pitch. Yeah,
you've just said it perfectly. So people who speak tonal languages like Mandarin, Cantonese, where the same word means different things dependent upon the tone in which you speak it, there are much higher rates of perfect pitch in those populations, and that also confers an advantage in terms of that pitch production. Yeah. So they tend to perform better, those populations of people, on pitch matching tasks and also pitch perception tasks as well. So if you speak a language that kind of requires that element of pitch, which isn't necessarily true of our language, it does definitely seem to confer an advantage in terms of your production of pitch generally in singing. I also noticed that at school, music school, all the kids who were playing an instrument that involves some tuning were more able to not had the perfect pitch necessary, but we had some, I don't know how you call it in English, like dictations. Somebody plays a piece of music, and we had to find the notes and write it down. Oh, okay, yeah. Write the sheet down. Yeah, transcribe. I don't know how it's called. Transcription? Probably. So it's I'm not a musician. They would play a melody, usually. It starts with a melody, and you have to find it again. Yeah. With the right rhythm and the right notes. And then after that, they play chords as well. So you have to guess what this is. But the students and the kids
who were better at it were those playing violin, cello. I found that when I started to play percussion, I had better abilities because when you have to tune timpanis.
Okay, yeah.
And sometimes on the go as well.
Yeah, amazing.
But I don't know whether that it's probably a factor as well.
Yeah, it makes sense, doesn't it? I guess if you're concentrating on those and training those kind of spectral features, then I guess it would make sense that improves your perceptual ability in relation to spectral features. So yeah, I think that's intuitive.
What is temporal perception?
Temporal. So research tends to kind of differentiate between spectral and temporal in relation to music. So spectral features, we're talking about kind of melody, pitch, harmony, all things that are related to the notes. But temporal is the kind of things that we look at over time. So that's like the beat, the rhythm, the meter. Those are the kind of things that we're talking about when we're talking about temporal perception. So beat is obviously kind of like the pulse of the music. A rhythm is kind of a series of notes, how you might lay them out. So like da, 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 da would be a very basic rhythm, but that can be laid out across a number of different meters. So meter is how we organize those rhythms in terms of like bars and across the beat, basically. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And can fetuses and babies perceive it? I've found it. I mean, I don't know how you test it, but I found a definite improvement in my son. I didn't notice it but maybe because I wasn't paying attention. But when you tap a certain rhythm or you play with them, tapping rhythms or doing something, they can reproduce the same number of beats or hits
quite interesting.
somewhere.
Yeah.
Which before the weren't able or earlier.
Yeah. So I guess there's also other factors that are developing, obviously, alongside all of these things.
Counting
so it's hard.
Well.
Counting, but even just like motor skills, like in those very early months or whatever, you're never going to be able to get a baby to kind of copy something because they just can't hold anything. So I guess it's hard to know about a lot of these things. And also you've got attention that's developing alongside this, linguistic abilities that are developing alongside this. So it's really hard to research those kind of things in isolation. But yeah, we definitely see across those early years development across, all of those areas of musical, spectral and temporal processing. So yeah,
because there's an age when you can ask your kids to repeat. Well, they want to repeat everything you say.
Yeah.
So maybe not yours. Mine definitely copies. Is such a copycat.
Is there an age when they listen to you? I can't wait for that age.
I think there's an age when they listen to you. They love listening to you. Then there's an age when they stop listening to you.
We've never got to the age when
it starts again at some point, and it just goes in yo-yo.
Waxes and wanes all the way through childhood and adulthood too. Yeah.
But I did notice that when obviously I was playing with my son, trying because he kept repeating what I was saying, and I kept doing, and then I started doing some sounds and noises and rhythm, and he was doing the same rhythm or sometimes the same number of things I was doing. So
it's amazing. Never tried that with mine. Maybe I'll go home and start whacking things and see what she does. Probably just hit me.
How are we all sensitive to meter, or is the answer is no, because you said at the beginning you felt like you didn't have any sense of rhythm.
Well, it would be incorrect for me to say that I was insensitive to meter, though. I think we all do have some kind of sensitivity to it, even people who haven't had musical training. I think some people have, again, better abilities in these things than other people. But I guess research does show that we do seem to have a preference, like universally, for something that has structure, metric structure, as opposed to something that doesn't. So we like regularities, and we're very good at processing regularities in our environments. So like I alluded to earlier, things like it's something that you become quite specialised at quite quickly in relation to the metric structures that are familiar to your culture. But universally there does seem to be this preference for things that have a metric structure over things that don't. So I would say yes, we probably all have some degree of sensitivity to metric structure.
And is it the same as pitch, or like as you said, some people can't sing a tune and don't have any perception?
That's a really good question. I don't know actually, but I know that congenital amusia is related more to the spectral features of music rather than the temporal features of music. I don't know if there's an equivalent in the temporal domain, or whether congenital amusia can include like a deficiency in, the rhythmic features of music. But yeah, interesting question.
And how about the development of emotional response to music? What sort of acoustic features allow us to create emotions in music?
Yeah, so it's kind of quite intuitive, the answer to that question, right? So if I was singing loudly, you might assume that that's more happy than if I was singing quite quietly, or if you're singing really fast, then that's probably going to be, happiness, whereas slow is sad. So that seems to be quite universal. There's quite, obvious characteristics. Mode as well, so major, minor, happiness, sadness, respectively. So yeah, that seems to be something that's relatively standard. And our ability to infer emotion and the cues that we use to do that actually changes quite a lot over the course of development. And pitch perception does become more specialised over the course of development. So 2-3-year-olds aren't necessarily great at perceiving, key structures and, melodies that fit within or deviate from keys. Yeah, so the idea that pitch is a very salient cue doesn't happen till slightly further on. So like 4 or 5-year-olds, when they're starting to learn about emotion, I guess before that, labeling emotion is quite hard. They'll use those quite obvious cues, like the speed of the song, how loud it is, and then the more kind of structural pitch related things like harmonies and melodies become more important later in development. So 7-8-year-olds have much better ability to think about those pitch related features of music in terms of the emotions that might be associated with them.
Interesting.
Yeah, and words as well. They use words, obviously. Lyrics are quite a salient feature.
It's some music, maybe, I can think about a lot of French songs that sound happy, but when you read the lyrics and try to understand the lyrics, they're not necessarily happy.
Yeah.
And I've never realised before actually trying to understand the lyrics.
Yeah.
Because you learn the songs, but you don't necessarily learn the words.
Do you know what emotion they're trying to convey now? Is it obvious to you now if there's this mismatch between the features of the music and the lyrics?
Yeah, well...
Do you know what the intended emotion is?
I don't know. But,
or is it meant to be ambiguous?
I don't know. But sometimes I think, oh, that's horrible. I don't want to sing that anymore.
It's amazing, isn't it, when you revisit like fairy tales and things that are from your childhood.
Yeah, same.
Like, and they're really dark, some of them.
Cinderella is horrible.
Yeah. Lots of them are. Snow White, not nice.
Yeah,
Hansel and Gretel, absolutely terrifying.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, so there's a lot of that. Like, what are we doing to these poor little kids? But, maybe we should move away from those traditional nursery rhymes and fairy tales and start making up our own stories.
Well, there's loads of new ones, and very quickly they listen to their peers' songs, and there's... I can think about Cocomelon. It's like...
Oh. Yep. That's another one.
I had a period of Cocomelon for quite a while.
It's terrible. I've had the JoJo and Gran Gran theme tune stuck in my head on repeat for quite some time. It's like a proper earworm, that one. So earworms, those songs that get stuck on repeat. Like,
it's a nice one though.
It is maybe for half an hour, but it was stuck with me for a fair few days. And Michael at one point was like, "Can you just stop singing JoJo and Gran Gran?" I was like, "Oh, really? I'm singing it just subconsciously, just like cracking on with that." Yeah, great.
It's a nice series though. We really like JoJo and Gran Gran.
Yeah, it's very wholesome, isn't it?
And just talking about it, I've got the music now in my mind.
Yeah. It's weird how everybody calls her Gran Gran. You know, like everyone. Yeah. But other than that, I think it's lovely.
About emotions, I don't know if you know, but athletes are not allowed to listen to music during competitions.
Yeah.
Because it can inhibit their pain. So basically, you can't run a marathon, or maybe you can.
Yeah.
But if you
But, like,
do that as a
competitively,
professional,
yeah.
you're not allowed to listen to music because it inhibits your pain.
Yeah, I had no idea. That's pretty
It's
amazing.
quite interesting, yeah.
Yeah.
So, and it definitely creates some. So obviously, after you've put your kids to bed, you suddenly are knackered. You've got you lose so much energy.
Yeah.
And sometimes it hasn't worked very often, all the time. But sometimes I've put like some music with strong beats or some workout music or playlists, and it just motivates me very quickly again.
Yeah, there's loads of research in that.
Motivates me to work out or go
that's
for
amazing.
a run
I tend to just fall off a cliff when my kids go to bed in terms of my energy levels, and then I just go to bed 7:30. I'm in bed.
But sometimes you've got even no energy to even put some music on.
Exactly. I don't make it to the other side of bedtime a lot of time. I just wake up 3 hours later in bed with my kids, just like, I should probably go to my own bed now. But there is research in how we use music to regulate our mood, and there's a lot about the use of music for exercise as well, and it's a very good regulator. But I've never heard that thing about inhibiting pain or being able to kind of use it to overcome that very physical sensation. That's quite an interesting phenomenon.
And then something that was quite interesting when we spoke about a podcast episode with you was the fact that obviously singing emerges spontaneously.
Yeah. That's quite a nice thing to see as a parent, isn't it? Like when I was writing this lecture, this part of it was one of those things that I just thought, actually, I really relate to that just from being a parent. And it's just, I don't know about you, but like it from 2 onwards, when they start just piping into song, like my little girl at the moment, she's obsessed with Jingle Bells. Jingle Bells. And it's just the sweetest thing that she suddenly kind of grasped the idea of what singing is. And it's just, she can't really do it in tune or in time, or she can't get all the words into the right, space and time, but she's trying so hard to, express through song, and it's such a lovely phenomenon to watch.
Mine was singing Jimbo Balls, Jimbo Balls. You couldn't get it.
Yeah, exactly. It's just so cute.
But it's a way to express yourself, and all the kids do it.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting. That's what you were saying.
Yeah. So and a lot of them engage in this spontaneous song, and research shows that the best time of day to observe that is this period right before they go to sleep, where they suddenly kind of like they become quite chatty or quite up for talking and singing along about their day, and
or they they describe a situation by singing.
Exactly.
There's I've got 2 really, I think they're really cute, but I usually when I asked my daughter to say thank you, I ask her to say in French, and so merci mon papa, and then I've made up, like, I've asked her to say mon papa que j'aime, mon papa who I love, and then so she does it naturally now, which is very cute. But one day I asked her to say thank you. So what do you say? And merci. And she started to carry on singing mon papa que j'aime, mon papa que j'aime. Or another time when obviously my wife was saying I'm not of any use. It must have been a very dark time at the time, but and then she just spontaneously started to sing "You're not of any use."
They're like sponges. They get all that awful stuff that you say in passing, and then they like magnify it back at you. It's just terrible.
So it's really funny how they, and at some point, sometimes also they will just describe that the TV is on the wall and sing it. So I don't know if it's happened to you. Yeah,
definitely. So that the emergence of that kind of spontaneous song definitely comes between like the ages of 2 and 3, and they just see their world in such a musical way. I think it's just really lovely to observe. But there's kind of lots of ideas about how that helps to create narratives and understand environments, and Yeah, there's a phenomenon called, as a term that I really like, called potpourri songs as well, where they take songs they know, like Old MacDonald Had a Farm, for example, and then they like personalise it to kind of like add in a little bit of flavour of their own. So, you know, it might be Old MacDonald had a farm, and then he played with the dolly and took it for a walk, and then they take it on their own little journey as well. So like the idea of potpourri and taking little bits of everything to create something new. So I don't know if you see that one in your kids a lot, but that was something that one of the researchers has written about.
At the moment, there's a lot of when poo-poo and wee-wee mode.
So much of that.
There's a lot of songs that are like lyrics that are transformed in poo-poo and wee-wee and bottom.
Absolutely. We've got a lot of that going on as well.
But then, you know, sometimes it's so funny that you just encourage it.
I know, it is so funny, isn't it? Like, it's just the amount of humour that provides for them. It's bizarre. And I don't know about you, but one of the things I love about Parenthood is it just takes you back to this place, especially when they're like really, really little, like the age your son and my daughter is now, and you can see like the excitement of the world through their eyes, like discovering things for the first time, and like things that you would not think twice about, but you take them to a new place and you see this beauty in nothing, you know, in the mundane, but also like humour in the totally ridiculous, you know, like poo and wee suddenly becomes like, how funny it is for them is just very endearing for you as a parent. So it's like there are so many challenges of being a parent to young kids, but there is so much beauty associated with it. Well, you have to remind yourself of that
sometimes it's really hard to remember this.
Definitely.
Let's face it, it's really hard, isn't it?
It's so hard. But you know, occasionally they're really cute.
Yeah, but there's a lot of horrible times as well.
I'm trying really hard to be positive about Parenthood.
I know, but you know, something that I wish we would have been aware of, and there's so many topics that we could talk about, but that, you know, people don't want to say that time sometimes is horrible, but they need to be honest. The others need to know about it, and I know it's. You know, it's really good news that you're going to have a child and your partner is pregnant. But, you know, very often I think I want to say good luck first. Yeah. And then, yes, you're going to enjoy it as well, but good luck.
But it is really tough.
And I wish I had been prepared for it as well. Yeah. For a lot of things.
Although I did find when I was pregnant with my first, there was so much negativity around parenting. It's just like, it's really hard. Have you got family close by? I was like, nope. They were like, you're going to really struggle. I was
but at least you're prepared.
Thanks. Yeah. But it takes away the magic of it. It's a journey. It is a really tough gig. But yeah, I think it's...
But you've got a big... Yes, it's amazing. I
wouldn't change it for the world.
Yeah, exactly.
But it is hard.
But what I regret, because it makes you think, is it like this? I've never been told of this. I've never been told it would be that horrible.
Yeah, like your expectations of perfect kids.
Deprivation. I've never been told that it would be 50-50, and for the first... like it's really hard to interact with your baby at the beginning, and it
is tough.
So yeah,
you're right. It is really tough, and it's definitely not all singing and dancing. Just to bring it back to the music,
it's getting better though. It gets better.
The older they get, the more they can comprehend.
Yeah,
I think I don't know if it gets easier, but it's different. Every stage of it's different, isn't it? And then I guess you introduce a second one into the mix, and there's this whole sibling rivalry dynamic going on, very big in our house at the minute. Like every morning and every evening, it's a battle, and then you get to work feeling like you've just depleted all your emotional energy, and you've got this day where you have to be able to have like coherent conversations, and you're emotionally exhausted, physically exhausted, because they still wake up all night. I don't know about your children, but my 4 and 2-year-old, they'll still wake up at least twice a night. Well, you know, 2 times a night, typically.
Yeah, my daughter doesn't. My son
does
same for
quite
us. Often. But
So
he gets back to sleep very quickly.
But I don't know about you.
Well, so that's another thing actually I wanted to speak to you about. It's quite interesting. So there's been a BBC program that showed that if they exposed or played music of a baby crying,
yeah,
parents would be really alert and have reflexes, really good reflexes. And it's just natural, because if your baby cries and you hear your baby crying, you need to be alert and be reasonable and all that. But you could be extremely tired, sleep deprived. But if your baby wakes up at night crying, you struggle to get him or her back to sleep. You won't be able to get back to sleep because you heard crying for so long that your brain is just ready to action. Yeah, and it's incredible, but really annoying on the other hand. And my way of dealing with this was to play white noise, and that very often works, like 70% of the time, or reading. That calms me down.
Oh, that's good.
But I don't always do it, because sometimes I'm so knackered I just can't be bothered doing it. But that was quite an interesting thing. I don't know if you researched or if you've done anything research review on this.
No, I give a lecture on sleep in the first years, but it's more about the kind of like neurotransmitters associated with sleep. And I wish I knew the strategies to get back to sleep, because I'm like you say, you wake up in this very hyper alert state. Like my 2-year-old last night, she just woke. Well, she didn't even wake up. She was asleep, and in her sleep, she was having a tantrum about someone taking her toy buggy off her. But just like, that's my buggy, like very, very cross about it. And I was suddenly like bolt upright from whatever stage of sleep I might have been in. I was suddenly very awake, and then that was like 5 to 3 this morning, and I have not been back to sleep since, because I just couldn't get there. And I was like, okay, I'll put some meditative music on, but I think that I'm very much in planning mode as well. Like, I think that there's an element of stress and what's going on in your life aside from your home environment or whatever. Like, I'm on the countdown to Christmas at this point in time. Like, I just need a break. It's been a semester that's been totally busy, and I think that that's feeding into my ability to get back to sleep. So I think the less stress you have beyond your life, it's probably easier to achieve that mastery of falling asleep anytime, anywhere. I look at people who can do that with envy, but then at the same time, there's times when I sleep like the dead, and you can't wake me up. Like, Michael came in the other night and said, your daughter was trying to pull a little security blanket out from underneath me and screaming and hitting me, and I was absolutely fast asleep. So just so tired. There's no chance. So
one of the upcoming episodes of High Point is with Victoria Williamson, who's just created a company called Odyssin, and it's an app that creates very specific types of sounds.
Oh, nice.
Designs like songs to concentrate and also calm down to sleep. She's got
I'd love to know about the research behind that kind of stuff.
So you'll have to listen to that episode.
Yeah, I will. I'll ask her questions from me, like, are there certain pieces of research that suggest that there's a certain frequency that promotes attentive behaviour? And I'd like to have a conversation with her.
So she'll be able to describe it a bit better, but she explained me very quickly that they try to replicate, to get the brain to generate a very low frequency, so 5 hertz.
Yeah.
That will help you concentrate.
Amazing.
So they send 2 different types of frequencies, and the brain will try to compensate the difference. So 100 and 105, for example.
That sounds like
and the brain will try to compensate and generate the low frequency. That's how I've understood it.
Oh, okay. I'm definitely going to have to listen to that one. It sounds interesting.
Explain it. What do you think about daily practice and
in musicianship?
Inborn talent. Do you think
the same old nature-nurture question?
Is a talent, or it's educated and it's based on the environment? It's influenced by the environment.
Like most things in psychology, the answer is it's definitely a little bit of both. So it's a really lovely thought, isn't it, that we could just, through practice, become really proficient at something. And there is an element of, absolutely, you can improve your ability and a skill through deliberate practice. And if you apply yourself a certain amount to something, inevitably you're going to get better at it. There's also obviously perhaps a genetic predisposition to be the kind of person that is capable of applying themselves to deliberate practice in a certain way as well. So there's, lots of factors going on there. But yeah, I think personality, individual differences, starting age of music as well, that's shown to play an important factor in kind of musical competency later down the line. So,
but is it because education is more intense when we're younger than we're older, and we don't have as much time to practice?
That, to an extent, yeah. But then what we see in language development is that there's this kind of critical period for language learning. So I think, have you heard of Jeannie, this girl who was kept in solitary confinement? It's a very, very sad story. But she basically, she was discovered when I think she was 13, and she'd never learned language because she was basically kept in very, very brutal, horrible conditions, child abuse. And she never ever had the ability to acquire that skill further down the line. So there is some suggestion that we have, perhaps not to the same degree, a critical period for music learning as well. So that unless you get this certain kind of skill set within those early years, you'll never be quite as proficient if you pick something up later down the line. I'm not saying you can't play the guitar if you start at the age of 40, but the level of proficiency you will achieve is definitely related to the age at which you start an instrument. And
do you think we can become a music expert or a professional musician with practice, with just deliberate practice?
I think so, yeah. I think that there's many things to it. Depends on what kind of musician you want to become. Like, creativity is a huge component of musicianship, right? Like, I don't know, it depends on what you're talking about. If you're talking about being a concert orchestral violinist, then maybe that's a bit different from being a rock star, like, who plays bar chords and doesn't actually need a great degree of musical proficiency. So I guess that entirely depends upon what you mean by expertise. But I think you can use music to suit the needs of you, and you can get the degree of proficiency that you want to through that motivation a lot of the time to learn and play.
Yeah, I'm really interested. I'd be really interested to know more details about those people who have an incredible talent, who could play an instrument very quickly or improvise. Is it because they're just talented?
There's definitely.
Is it because they've been exposed to something else before, or they've played another instrument that that gave them so many skills that they can play very quickly? It's quite interesting.
It's an amazing question, and I don't think it's something that's ever going to be entirely clear cut. But I do think there is a role of genetics, because you see that, musicianship does run in families. Like, there's not a huge amount of musical expertise in my family, and I haven't inherited this great musical ability. But I mean, extrapolating from that, there is a genetic component to that kind of propensity to master it, I think. Yeah. But that's not to say that it's not a skill that is malleable. Like, researchers suggested that about close to 30% of the variance in musical proficiency can be explained by deliberate practice. So, that it's a huge factor that contributes to our capability in music. And, I think if you really, really wanted it, you could absolutely make it happen, which is a nice thought. But some people, that might come easier to, because they've got that genetic propensity to musical ability that others don't, maybe.
Let's hope, though. Obviously,
hope for us, yeah.
There's I don't know if it's right to think like this, but there's obviously in the French culture, there seems to be a lot of praise on talent. So somebody's talented or not, and if you're talented, you can carry on. If you're not talented, you can stop.
And how do they frame?
And there's no encouragement to practice.
Wow.
But I think that's my perception, and it's probably changed, or it's probably like very how do you say, restricted in idea. But that's my perception. And then I see also that the Americans are very much onto practicing hard work, and a lot of the books and information that goes out is about deliberate practice. It's about not giving up. And if you want something, you learn with practice and with time and patience, you'll get there eventually. And
I think that's the main barrier, though, isn't it? Is that people realise that it requires more input than they're prepared to give it. For people who don't have that talent, it's a slog. And that can be a huge deterrent for a lot of people. So I guess the people you see who get to the top are likely going to be the ones who it comes easier to, who don't have to sit there and slog at it for so long, or in such a hard way, as the people who don't have the talent, maybe. I don't know. So I guess the two meet together, don't they? There's a certain element of both in it, but it is interesting how you notice a cultural difference there between your countries and the United States in their approach to the tuition of it. So,
I don't know about other countries. It's just because I've been exposed to some specific types of education and books and information. So thank you very much.
Thank you. It's
been
really
very
interesting.
Nice. And I hope a lot of people will listen to this. If some people are interested in the course, how can they find about it or learn more about music psychology?
There's a really good network. Actually, I need to advertise. So there is a Northern Empirical Music Research Network that people can look into, which is a really nice place to consolidate opportunities in education related to music psychology, and also the latest research in musical psychology. So you can subscribe to the mailing list of that. But in terms of my course, it's currently only available to undergraduate students at the University of Manchester.
Okay.
So that's, unless you come and do a degree with us, not something that's in the public domain. But
any books about music psychology generally?
Yeah, there's some really good ones out there that, there are.
Can't remember the names. I'm sorry. It's okay.
Yeah, there's some books. There are some books about music psychology.
If you remember some of them, I will put them in the links in the description.
But I'm always happy to talk about music psychology with anyone who wants to. I find it a very interesting subject. I do not profess to be an expert in all aspects of music psychology, or any, to really. But my email address is annie.pye, PYE, @manchester.ac.uk.
Great. Thank you, Annie.
Thank you very much for having me.